Well, we start with new information on the victims of that horrific shooting and a gut-wrenching scene going on right now at Robb Elementary School. The Associated Press reports that 19 children have been killed in Uvalde, Texas, making this the deadliest school shooting in state history. These are third and fourth grade kids, along with 2 adults. And we can finally put a face to one of the victims.
Eva Mireles has been identified as the 4th grade teacher who was killed. She was a mother and wife who loved running and hiking and had been with the Uvalde Consolidated Independent School District for 17 years.
Uvalde is a small rural city about 80 miles west of San Antonio. We have several crews reporting from there tonight, starting with Adriana de Alba live outside Robb Elementary School.
Adriana, this seems to still be a very active, emotional scene.
It's heartbreaking. I can't even describe it, this feeling. It's been more than 10 hours since this tragedy unfolded, and parents tonight are still trying to figure out what is happening with their children. I'm sorry.
Ross here. Go around and find out. I don't really want to get too loud here. Let's see where I'm at. Pretty hard to talk about, really. Really what I'm thinking, what I'm seeing. But it's pretty sad to experience. I'll be back a little later on from the hotel room. It is me, Ross, for the Fuck Around and Find Out podcast. I'm kind of going solo here today. We're going to touch on a few things, but the podcast, we're going through not really a transition, but I would say we're trying to streamline what we do to get a better product, as John mentioned earlier on the video. It's sometimes difficult. We have technical difficulties. I know I have them very often. And it's kind of hard sometimes because we are transmitting or broadcasting rather from all over the world. But today, I'm going to address some things that I experienced, saw, witnessed, or basically felt. We'll jump right into it. And let's see. How do we start this? Okay, a couple of weeks ago, my parents told me that they wanted to go to Uvalde, or Uvalde, as it's, I guess it should be pronounced Uvalde, but it's been anglicized, I think, to some extent, so, you know, it's referred to as Uvalde, or Uvalde, however, site of the tragic massacre. There's no other real way to describe it. My parents wanted to go. I still haven't clarified their reasoning. I probably will. I want to ask them, but I probably never will. I'm gonna venture a few guesses here, and this is all gonna tie in. This is all gonna, you know, I'll wrap it all up into one big bundle, and try to make sense of a lot of things. They said they wanted to go, so I volunteered to drive them because it's not that close. Nothing in Texas really is. It's about 4.5 hours. Took me about 5 hours because I missed a turn, and when you miss a turn out there, it's hard to get back to it because there's literally nothing out there in many parts of the state. So my feeling for them is I had to consider, contemplate, you know, had to think about them. And they're getting up there in age. They're pretty old. My mom was about 18, and my dad was about 20, 21 maybe, when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. That was a huge event for them. They told me so. It's a type of thing where they could tell you exactly where they were when they heard or where they were informed of it. It's a big thing. And I think it still is. I think I've always felt that it is a major event in the history of this country for many reasons. We can get into all sorts of debates about that, but I do. There's no doubt that it had a certain type of impact on them and their lives. About 2 years ago, during the lockdown, during the pandemic, Bob Dylan. We'll stay ahead of the curve and mention Bob Dylan here. Bob Dylan released a song called Murder Most Foul. I don't know if you've heard it, good. If you haven't, you don't have to listen to it, but there's nothing wrong with listening to it. The only thing is it's about 15 or 16 minutes long. And if you don't have that type of time, then I wouldn't worry about it. But the Murder Most Foul that he is mentioning in the song is the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Now, it seemed to me the timing of when he released this song, I'm not sure when he wrote it. Dylanologists will probably be able to tell you exactly when he wrote it. I'm not sure when, but I do think that the release of it was, the timing was significant. Right in the middle of the pandemic, during the lockdown, when there was a lot of uncertainty, nobody knew what was going on. There was a lot of fear. And I think for him, this book ended well. The pandemic, the lockdown, and the assassination of John F. Kennedy. In the song, he himself says that something about somebody told him that when the day Kennedy was killed was the beginning of the age of the Antichrist or something like that. I'm not going to get into any type of esoteric speak, but what I do believe is that it was a turning point for this country. The way people viewed society. John F. Kennedy was young. He had ideas reflected in a lot of voters and a lot of young people. In the direct aftermath of the assassination, the 60s were turbulent. The 70s were, and I think the 80s were kind of a reaction to that, or the 80s probably was the culmination of a lot of things that certain people had been trying to adjust since the Roosevelt administration back in the 30s or 40s. Okay, but the whole point that I'm trying to make with this is this was an important moment for Bob Dylan, I believe, and I see the same thing for my parents. I could see they're old. I could see he's old. Bob Dylan is not a boomer, nor are my parents. They are what is called the silent generation, I believe. These were people that worked hard, kept their head down. The characteristics, you can look them up, but they're not baby boomers. And like I said, neither is Dylan. They've seen a hell of a lot, is probably my main point. They've seen like a hell of a lot of things, a lot of changes, a lot of traumatic events. I think for my parents, the incident in, the tragedy, I don't want to call it an incident, but tragedy in Uvalde was very strong and meant a lot. I don't think they could have ever imagined experiencing this. Something so horrendous, something so deeply saddening, something so utterly depressing on so many levels. And we can, I imagine at some point I'll go through each facet of this horrible thing and I don't know, just try to manage it. To come to terms with it, I think is probably the best way to say, because I can't, I'm experiencing it as a parent, and it's deeply disturbing to me. There's a part of me that I'll never get over it. but I think for them it was deeply concerning. For my parents, it was deeply concerning, and my mom wanted to pay her respects. My dad was okay. We'll go. We went, and I think for them, they saw the children, the pictures of the children, and they saw themselves. They saw me, and they saw my son. The demographics of the place, it's not that close, like I said, but the demographics of the place, of the town, are very similar to these here. The children look like children I've seen and known. They look like kids I grew up with. They look like kids that I've seen around, kids that I've coached, and it's just, that's what really is gripping about it. I remember the day my son had a similar day as the children at that school. He had his award ceremony. We were able to sign him out and bring him home. So at about the time that thing was starting, about 2 hours later, I saw it on news. They were mentioning what was going on, and from then on, it's been pretty much sadness, outrage, fury since. So we went to the place. We got to the place, and the school, Robb Elementary, and it looks so much smaller in person. The area in front where the sign is, it's I guess become well known, where the flowers and the gifts and the stuffed animals and the pictures are, and it's really it's hard to keep it together. My mom walked around. My dad walked around once and went back, leaned up against the car. It was not an easy thing to be around. My son and I walked around. We were looking, talking quietly. I did record a little bit of video. It was really tough, though. It was tough to keep it together. It's tough to really put thoughts together, and I'm barely able to do it now. I'm doing it with from a more analytical perspective. I'm trying to keep, I guess, personal views out of it, but that's kind of impossible. Yes, it felt personal, the whole thing, and has since. The feeling I got there was deep. It was a deep, cutting blue feeling. I don't know how to explain it. I can, and it doesn't really matter what I feel, because I can't even begin to imagine what the families feel like, and the loss that they feel, that I felt, but that they live through, and daily, forever. And it was tough. It was definitely tough. And again, all that was going through my head was why this shooter, this maladjusted or malcontent, whatever you want to call him. We can go into the mental health aspects. We could touch on that. We can talk about that. That has something to do with everything here. The poor approach that we have to mental health in this country and this society has something to do with it, but it doesn't excuse anything that this guy did. Okay, let's be clear about that. The fact that he could get hold of that firearm that easily is an issue, and that's mostly what I'll be touching on. But in a larger scope. And of course, the response or lack of response or poor response, pathetic response of law enforcement in that area is shameful, and the fact that nobody's been held accountable is even worse, probably, than the inaction to begin with. But we can get into that later or some other day. The fact is, we have a serious issue in this culture. It's becoming a sickness. I do believe it's a sickness at this point. I don't think that it's being addressed. We can talk about gun control or restriction of certain weapons, automatic weapons or semi-automatic weapons, but beyond that, we have a sickness in this culture about firearms, and beyond that, with violence. And it's hard to break from. Why? It's ingrained. It's there in our history. From the arrival of the first settlers, they decided that they would impose their religion, their culture, their way of life, their beliefs, their way of doing things by violence. Slaughtering natives and then kidnapping, enslaving Africans, and continuing this from one coast all the way to the other, from sea to shining sea. That's there. The firearms are a big part of it, but it's this idea that you can get your way with violence. We see it in movies. We see it all the time in movies. And, we all like watching the movies. I can't even act like I don't. But we have to compartmentalize this. We have to go above and beyond this and realize that this is not helping us. Not talking about restricting what we watch or how we express ourselves, or art, or what we write, what we watch on TV or movies. We ourselves as human beings, as Americans, if you want to get in that type of a thing, I don't really look at it that way. I'm not a big believer in exceptionalism, American exceptionalism rather. We have to understand that that's violence is not the solution for everything. It happens. We do it overseas. We've done it overseas. We don't like mentioning that. We don't like talking about that. What that gunman did in that classroom is something we've been doing for several decades now in other parts of the world. We don't like to talk about that. But that's fact. If they're doing it over there, why should we be shocked that it happens here in a small town? The availability of these firearms now, I'm not, see, and this always turns into, you want to abolish all the guns, you want to take all the guns away. I'm not here to talk about that. I don't even like addressing that, because I understand that sometimes you need a firearm for self-defense in certain parts of the country, in certain parts of town. Who am I to deny somebody the ability to defend themselves or their loved ones? Again, all of this, talking about within reason. Hunting for sport, that's fine. I don't have an issue with that. I don't, I think it's cool that guys are able to do that. Not my thing, but I definitely think that that's a hobby for some guys. I guess it's worthwhile. Good for them. But the whole thing with the automatic weapons or the semi-automatic weapons or whatever this guy had never never fired a gun before in his life that I know of, or that I believe that's what the report said, and yet he went in there with that AR-15, was able to buy it a week before, right after, I guess it's his birthday or right after his birthday. Never had no experience, and yet was able to do all that damage and hold off 400 grown-ass men trained supposedly to do things. And they were reluctant, I would say, primarily because of that weapon. I think that says a lot. That should be enough to convince us we have an issue with that. We have to address our reluctance, rather our enthusiasm about protecting guns, rights to guns, and how we don't protect the rights of our lives or the right to live. I mean, you know, we protect guns more than we protect lives, mine, yours, my sons, my wife, my parents. There's something to be said about that. There's a segment of the population that will never be convinced. Now, there's so many reasons why. You know, I can analyze those all day, all night. I don't know if it does any good. They're not going to move. They're entrenched. They believe the myths. They believe the movies. They believe they're Rambo. They believe they're Andrew Jackson. And again, it's historic. The threat of death has moved a lot of things in this country. And it's not just been the threat, it's been the active killing. We need to get past this. Now, I don't know how. I don't know. It's not, you know, we can get on you. We can jump on YouTube. We can jump on any social media and talk about this endlessly. You got to give up trying to be tough all the time. You know, I don't get that. They're culturally, they've always spoken about my community being violent. I remember reading a long time ago about how they considered the savagery of the Indian and the bloodthirsty or cruelty of the Spaniard combined to make, you know, a really sneaky, low-life killer in the Mexicans. And you read that, and that kind of sticks in your head. Damn, you know, I don't want to kill anybody. Me personally, I don't want to kill anybody. I've never been the type of dude like, yeah, I'm gonna go and fight, and I'm gonna, you know, overly aggressive. You know, I know guys that were like that, but I think most of the time they were defending themselves or whatever. But you have that in all different backgrounds. We're stereotyped as being violent. But yet, when I was a kid, I started reading history and I started looking at history and considering history. And I'm like, well, goddamn, look who's really been violent. I mean, you don't just move all the way across a big area of land without slaughtering people, men, women, and children. And that's the history of the country. And it's amazing that, I guess this is the main point, is that we see the death and we don't do anything about it. That's been probably the most consistent thing I've seen in our society. We see these children in Uvalde. I don't know what's going to be done about it, or if anything will be done. You can go back to Sandy Hook, that's in the news currently with the Alex Jones trial. Was done after that, and if nothing was done after that, you really, I felt all bets were off, because if you weren't outraged, if you didn't think that something needed to be done after that, then nothing is going to get done. A few weeks after Uvalde, there was a trailer of migrants. They suffocated in the trailer. Death, right there. Not even that far from Uvalde either. Just southwest of San Antonio, I believe. Not maybe an hour or two from Uvalde, which is not that far in Texas. Let me assure you. Death. Death. It happens. You're okay with it. You know, me, I get a little shocked. I'm like, well, that shouldn't have happened. Why did this happen? Like when I was walking at Robb Elementary. Why did this have to happen? Why? Some people don't care. It got cold a couple of years ago, really cold here in Texas, and the lights went out and people died. Not much was done. The threat of death, it's there. Something has to change. I don't have the solutions, but I can see that it's an issue, and it's becoming more and more of an issue. The people that complained about the children wearing face coverings as they returned to school after the pandemic, after the lockdown. And people complained and want their kids wearing face masks or whatever. I had to confront that. They don't care about death. They think death is a legitimate threat, or a legitimate, I guess, incentive to behave, to follow, to maintain the status quo. And, you know, what I'm getting at, advantage, privilege for certain people. Lives are real cheap, apparently. Mine. Yours. That's what I feel now. After the initial sadness, rage, deep pain that I felt, again, nothing compared to the families. And I look at it and I just think, wow, our lives are really expendable. It's been a rough few weeks since. It's been a rough time. There's still a lot of uncertainty. No telling what's going to happen from here on out. I think people who shouldn't have firearms, and probably have more than they need. More than the people who claim they need firearms. And that's a problem. We're gonna be living with this for a long time. I can't imagine. My wife and I have to send our son to school. I pulled him out last year because of the whole refusal to wear a face covering. And I have to send him up there. Take the risk. It's a risk now for parents to send their children to school. It's a risk for my mom to go to Walmart, because I remember El Paso. I'll never forget that. That one is very similar to Buffalo. What happened in Buffalo a couple weeks before Uvalde, which was racially motivated, which is, again, par for the course here. Can't go anywhere. I lived for 7 years in Mexico City. And there's always a threat of earthquake there, or tremors, or whatever they call them. They happen, and they don't happen. Well, I mean, there was a time I was there where they happened quite often. But there's always that, I don't want to say threat, but it's always in the back of your mind that it could happen at any time. So you kind of are always aware, but you don't. It doesn't weigh on you. You don't let it weigh on you. You just kind of live with it. It's part of life. It is. It just exists. It's like the clouds or the rain that comes in the late summer. There, it rains heavily every afternoon. But the earthquake, you just say, well, okay, could happen. I don't stop living. I keep going and going where I have to do, doing what I have to do. And this is like that. Now we just go thinking, well, could happen at any point. That's no way to live. I don't want to live this way. I could probably go on, but I would get into the police in action, and that also is linked to this crazy idea of this fetishization, I think how you pronounce it, of firearms and violence. Plays right into it. It's linked right there. Law enforcement officers whom we thought were going to run in like Bruce Willis, and they didn't. There's so much to talk about with this, and I really would like to discuss it with my co-hosts because they are from other countries, and I think their opinion is valid, and their questions, I'd like to field their questions, because I just talked. I put my ideas together, and I know I forgot some things I wanted to touch on. But this is a conversation that it's never going to end. I can't see anything. I can just see things getting worse, to be honest with you. I'm, Debbie Downer, doomsday guy, Armageddon is upon us, that type of thing. End of days type shit, but I don't see any other way. It's going to take a hell of a lot of people to change their mindset. And I'm not Pollyannish. I'm really cynical about it. But we can talk about this more. We can talk about this again. We can talk about this together, hopefully on the Fuck Around and Find Out podcast. I'm always willing to talk about issues in the United States because we have a hell of a lot, even though we deny most of them. We deny their existence, and that's why things continue to rot from within. We are our own worst enemy until we start acknowledging that we do things poorly, that we do things oppressively, and we don't take everybody into consideration in this country or elsewhere. We don't even do it with our own citizens. What can you expect overseas? So we'll be back with some more stuff, hopefully more lighthearted things. John will have a response video, I believe. And that's all for now. Thank you so much for paying attention. Thank you again for all of us here at the Fuck Around and Find Out podcast. Myself, Martin, and John, we appreciate all the support. We're working to get better for you. Thank you.